Convinced she had stolen his fortune, a powerful billionaire cast his wife out of his mansion, blind to the truth that she was pregnant with triplets. Brooklyn Heights slept beneath a veil of amber streetlights, the East River whispering secrets against stone embankments that had witnessed centuries of ambition, betrayal, and reinvention. Autumn had settled fully into the city, carrying with it a chill that seeped through coats and bones alike. The Lauron mansion rose above the neighborhood like an imported relic, European aristocracy transplanted into American excess. Its iron gates, marble columns, and manicured gardens were meant to inspire awe. On this night, they felt like the walls of a courtroom where judgment had already been decided. Isabella Lauron stood alone in the grand salon, the echo of her own breathing louder than the ticking of the antique clock mounted above the fireplace. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne, scents that had once comforted her. Now they made her chest tighten. She clasped her hands together, fingers interlaced so tightly that her knuckles burned. Without realizing it, she pressed one hand gently against her lower abdomen, a protective instinct as natural as breathing. 3 fragile lives rested there, unknown to everyone else in the room. Marriage, Isabella had believed, was supposed to be a refuge. She had crossed the Atlantic with that belief burning brightly inside her, leaving behind Paris, her mother's quiet bookshop near the Seine, and a life of modest certainty. Alexandre Lauron had seemed worth the sacrifice. He was brilliant, decisive, commanding. A Franco-Belgian billionaire whose logistics empire spanned continents, he moved goods and people with precision. When he loved intensely. Or so she had thought. Alexandre stood near the foot of the sweeping staircase, his tall frame rigid, his tailored charcoal suit flawless despite the storm of emotion brewing beneath the surface. His blue eyes, once warm when they found her across a crowded room, were now cold and sharp. Years of control had taught him how to bury feeling beneath composure. "The $50 million are gone," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "Transferred from a private family account early this morning." The words seemed unreal, like dialogue from a play she had wandered into by mistake. Isabella took a step forward. "Alexandre, I don't understand. How could?" He raised a hand, silencing her without touching her. "That account is protected. Only 3 people besides me had access. My mother, my sisters, and you." The accusation landed with brutal clarity. Across the room, Marguerite Lauron rose slowly from the velvet sofa, her movements graceful and deliberate. She was elegance personified, silver hair pinned neatly, pearls at her throat, posture straight despite her age. Her dark eyes held no uncertainty, only judgment hardened by decades of privilege. "Do not pretend to be shocked," Marguerite said coolly. "You came into this family with nothing but charm and ambition. Now $50 million disappears, and we are expected to believe you are innocent." Isabella turned to her husband, desperation rising in her chest. "Alexandre, please. Look at me. You know me. I would never steal from you. From us." For a moment, she thought she saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Then it vanished. Alexandre said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. In that instant, Isabella understood that the trial was over. Evidence no longer mattered. Her word meant nothing. Security was summoned quietly, efficiently. The humiliation burned as 2 uniformed men stood politely but firmly at her side. She was allowed to pack a single suitcase. No explanations. No investigation. No chance to defend herself. As she descended the staircase one final time, suitcase trembling in her grip, Isabella paused. She turned back, searching the room for the man she loved, hoping, foolishly, that he would stop this madness. That he would call her name. That he would choose her. He did not. The doors of the mansion closed behind her with a heavy finality. The sound echoed down the street as Isabella stepped into the cold Brooklyn night, her world reduced to a suitcase, a broken heart, and 3 unborn children whose future now depended entirely on her strength. She did not cry until the car she had hailed disappeared into traffic, carrying her away from the only life she had known for the past 5 years. The apartment in Crown Heights was small enough that Isabella could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. The ceilings were low, the paint chipped, and the radiator hissed like an old man clearing his throat. Outside, the subway thundered past every few minutes, rattling the windows and reminding her that the city never slept, even when she could not. This was exile. Within 24 hours of being cast out of the Lauron mansion, Isabella learned how thoroughly her life had been dismantled. Her bank cards were declined. Her joint accounts frozen. Her name removed from privileges she had once taken for granted. To the Lauron family, she no longer existed. At night, she lay awake on a borrowed mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying the scene in the salon again and again. Alexandra's silence haunted her more than Marguerite's words. She pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered apologies to the lives growing inside her. 3 weeks later, she sat alone in a small Brooklyn clinic, the antiseptic smell making her nauseous. The doctor studied the ultrasound screen, then smiled gently. "Well," she said, turning the monitor so Isabella could see, "it looks like you're carrying triplets." The word echoed in the room. "Triplets?" Isabella repeated faintly. "Yes. 2 boys and a girl, if everything continues normally." The doctor's expression softened. "You're strong, but this will be physically and emotionally demanding. You'll need support." Support. The word felt like a cruel joke. That night, Isabella opened her laptop and began typing a message to Alexandre. She told him she was pregnant. She imagined his reaction, the shock, the regret, the sudden understanding of what he had thrown away. Her fingers hovered over the send button. Then she remembered his face. His silence. She deleted the message. If he could believe she was capable of stealing from him, then he did not deserve this truth. Not yet. Isabella took whatever work she could find. She translated legal documents, assisted small immigrant-owned businesses, and consulted for European traders navigating American bureaucracy. Her accent, education, and precision opened doors that desperation alone could not. Each night, exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy coat, but she refused to collapse. Sitting on the edge of her narrow bed, she spoke softly to her unborn children. "I don't know how," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks, "but I promise you this. I will not fail you." The snow began falling just after midnight, thick and relentless, coating Brooklyn in a silence that felt almost sacred. Streetlights blurred behind white curtains, and the city, usually loud, impatient, unforgiving, slowed its breath. Inside a cramped Crown Heights apartment, Isabella Lauron folded forward in pain, her fingers digging into the edge of the kitchen counter as another contraction tore through her body. She had been alone when it started. The first pain was dull, almost deceptive, like a warning rather than a command. Isabella had tried to breathe through it, telling herself it was nothing, that she still had weeks. But within an hour, the pain sharpened, tightening around her body with a force that left no room for denial. She clutched her phone with trembling hands and called the only number she trusted, a neighbor she barely knew but who had once helped her carry groceries upstairs. By the time the ambulance arrived, snow was piling up on the sidewalks, muffling the sirens as if the city itself was trying to protect her from panic. At the hospital, everything moved too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Doctors spoke in calm, efficient voices. Nurses rushed. Machines beeped. Isabella drifted in and out of clarity, gripping the sheets, her body pushed beyond exhaustion into something raw and primal. 3 heartbeats, a nurse said at one point, or softening her professional tone. "You're doing amazing." Amazing was not how Isabella felt. She felt broken open. Hours later, long after she had lost all sense of time, the cries came. One, then another, then a third. High, fragile, furious sounds that sliced through the haze of pain and anchored her to the world again. Lucas was born first, loud and determined, fists already clenched as if ready to fight. Matteo followed, quieter, his cry softer but steady. Sophia came last, small and fierce, her tiny voice refusing to be ignored. Isabella sobbed openly as they placed the babies against her chest. Tears slid into her hair, onto the blankets, soaking into the moment. Exhaustion warred with overwhelming love, and love won. When the nurse gently asked for the father's name, Isabella closed her eyes. "Leave it blank," she said. The words hurt, but they were hers. Recovery was brutal. Her body ached in ways she had never known. Nights blurred into days, broken by feedings, cries, and the constant fear of doing something wrong. The apartment felt smaller than ever, crowded with bassinets, bottles, and an exhaustion so deep it settled into her bones. Money disappeared quickly. Hospital bills, diapers, formula, rent. More than once, Isabella found herself sitting on the bathroom floor in the middle of the night, her back against the tub, crying silently so the babies wouldn't hear. In those moments, doubt whispered cruelly in her ear, "You can't do this. You're alone." But each time, she stood back up. During naps, when all 3 babies slept at once, a rare and precious miracle, Isabella opened her laptop. At first, it was simply to work. Translating documents, reviewing contracts, answering emails from small businesses she had helped before giving birth. Then something shifted. She began noticing patterns, inefficiencies in supply chains, ethical shortcuts that hurt small vendors, corrupt middlemen who thrived in systems designed to favor the powerful. She had seen it all before, from the inside of Alexandra's empire. What she had once been forbidden to question, she now examined freely. An idea took shape. Not an empire. A counterweight. 10 years passed, and Alexandra Laurent's empire continued to rise, at least on paper. From the outside, Laurent Global Logistics looked invincible. Its glass headquarters in Manhattan pierced the skyline with arrogant confidence, reflecting the city like a mirror that refused to show cracks. Cargo ships bearing the Laurent insignia crossed oceans daily. Private jets lifted from runways with mechanical precision. Profits climbed. Shareholders applauded. Business magazines praised Alexandra Laurent as a visionary who had mastered global trade and turned efficiency into art. Inside the empire, something was rotting. Alexandra felt it every morning when he woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment overlooking the East River. The space beside him was always empty. He had never remarried. Never truly dated. Women passed through his life like transactions. Brief, controlled, emotionally sterile. They admired his wealth, his discipline, his power. None of them stayed long enough to ask questions he didn't want to answer. The memory of Isabella lingered like an old wound he refused to touch. He told himself he had done what was necessary. That betrayal, once discovered, demanded swift punishment. His mother had said so. His sisters had agreed. And at the time, certainty had felt like strength. Doubt had felt like weakness. So he buried himself in work. But the empire no longer felt clean. It began subtly. Minor discrepancies in quarterly reports. Expense ratios that seemed inflated but not alarming enough to demand confrontation. Carefully worded emails from compliance officers asking for clarification. Regional managers hesitating before signing off on transactions they didn't fully understand. Alexandra brushed them aside. Power required focus, he told himself. And family required trust. At the center of the Laurent household, Marguerite Laurent remained unshaken. Age had slowed her steps but sharpened her convictions. She still presided over family gatherings with quiet authority, her presence alone enough to command obedience. To Marguerite, loyalty to blood was sacred. Questioning family was betrayal. Helena and Colette flourished beneath that protection. Helena collected art, homes, and lovers with careless enthusiasm, her charm masking entitlement. Colette chased risky investments, her failures quietly absorbed by family funds before they could become public embarrassment. Both lived extravagantly, shielded by privilege and by Alexandra's refusal to look too closely. Family was family. Until the whispers grew louder. Anonymous tips arrived in internal audit. European regulators requested additional documentation. Longtime partners asked questions Alexandra had never heard them ask before. The empire still stood tall, but its foundation had begun to shift. Then came the junior analyst. His name was Elias Meyer, new, meticulous, and inconveniently honest. He stayed late, double-checked figures others waved away, and refused to accept because that's how it's always been done as an answer. Where others saw noise, Elias saw patterns. One evening, long after most of the building had emptied, Elias knocked on Alexandra's office door. "Sir," he said carefully, his posture rigid with awareness of the risk he was taking, "I need to show you something." Alexandra frowned but waved him in. Elias spread documents across the desk, transaction logs, timestamps, layered transfers designed to blur their origin. He traced the movement of funds backward, past recent years, past surface-level audits, back to a decade earlier. "The missing 50 million, Elias said quietly. "It wasn't one transfer. It was fractured, distributed, hidden through shell accounts." Alexandra leaned forward, his pulse accelerating. "And where does it lead?" Elias swallowed. "The access credentials belong to your sisters, Helena and Colette." The room went silent. "That's impossible," Alexandra said sharply. "They would never." "They didn't act alone," Elias continued. "They used intermediaries, assistants, offshore vehicles. But the authorization codes were theirs. And," he hesitated, "several compliance flags from that period were overridden. By your mother." The words struck like physical blows. Alexandra dismissed Elias without another word. Alone, he stared out at the city, memories crashing down around him. Isabella standing in the salon, her voice breaking, her eyes searching his face. His silence. The way he had turned away. He confronted Helena first. She laughed too quickly, her composure cracking under pressure. Colette followed, tears flowing easily but unconvincingly. When the evidence was placed in front of them, excuses crumbled. "We thought it wouldn't matter," Helena snapped. "You had everything. She had nothing." The words echoed in his skull. Marguerite listened in silence when he confronted her. When he finished, she closed her eyes. "I wanted to protect the family," she said softly. "Blood must come first." "And Isabella?" Alexandra asked hoarsely. Marguerite said nothing. That night, Alexandra locked himself in his office and screamed until his voice gave out. 10 years. 10 years of exile, punishment, and silence inflicted on an innocent woman. One name burned in his mind. Isabella. And for the first time since the night he cast her out, Alexandra Laurent faced the truth. The empire he had built was not merely flawed. It was founded on a lie. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments, documents, confessions, silences, each one cutting deeper than the last. Alexandra Laurent spent 3 days locked inside his Manhattan office, refusing calls, cancelling meetings, and ignoring the empire that had once defined him. The glass walls around him reflected a man he barely recognized. Eyes hollow, jaw unshaven, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of knowledge he could no longer deny. He had been wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. Helena's confession came first, though she never meant it to. When pressed by legal counsel and confronted with evidence she could not dismiss, her arrogance cracked. Rage replaced charm. "She was temporary," Helena spat. "You chose her over us. Over your own blood. We only corrected the imbalance." Alexandra said nothing. His silence frightened her more than shouting ever could. Colette followed hours later, tears flowing freely, her voice trembling as she justified what she had done with practiced desperation. "We never thought you'd throw her out like that. We thought you'd yell, argue, investigate. But you didn't. You chose to believe the worst." That was the moment the truth fully settled into Alexandra's chest. He had not been deceived alone. He had chosen deception because it was easier than doubt. Marguerite Laurent was the last to face him. She entered his office slowly, her once imposing presence diminished by age and by the evidence laid neatly across his desk. Bank trails. Authorization logs. Legal summaries prepared by people who no longer feared the Laurent name. She did not sit. "You raised me to protect the family," Alexandra said quietly. "But you taught me to sacrifice truth for comfort." Marguerite's lips trembled. "I believed blood was sacred." "And justice?" he asked. "Did that matter?" Her silence was answer enough. When she left, Alexandra remained seated long after the door closed, staring at the city he had conquered and the life he had destroyed. 10 years. 10 years since the night Isabella stood in the salon, pleading for him to look at her. 10 years since he had chosen silence over love. The weight of that decision crushed him now. That night, alone in his penthouse, Alexandre poured himself a drink he did not finish. He stood by the window, Brooklyn lights shimmering in the distance, and whispered her name aloud for the first time in a decade. Isabella. Saying it felt like reopening a wound that had never healed. He slept little. When he did, memories attacked him without mercy. Isabella laughing in the kitchen. Isabella reading by the window. Isabella's voice, steady and sure, telling him she believed in people. He woke before dawn with a realization that hollowed him completely. She had never defended herself aggressively, because she had trusted him. The next morning, Alexandre ordered a private investigation, not into his sisters, but into the woman he had exiled. He expected to find bitterness, failure, some proof that she had survived but not thrived. What he found unraveled him. The report was delivered quietly, efficiently, like everything else in his world. Isabella Laurent. Residence, Brooklyn. Profession, founder and CEO, Laurent and Vale. Company valuation, rising. Reputation, impeccable. Children, 3. Born 10 years ago. The room spun. Alexandre sank into his chair, his hands shaking violently. Triplets. The timing aligned with brutal precision. The night he had thrown her out. The weeks after. She had been pregnant. With his children. The realization tore something open inside him that could not be stitched back together. He imagined her alone in Brooklyn, cast out, carrying 3 lives while he sat in luxury convinced of her guilt. He imagined her giving birth without him. Raising their children without his name, his presence, his protection. A sound escaped his throat, something between a sob and a gasp. He had not just punished an innocent woman. He had abandoned his family. Guilt arrived not as a single emotion, but as a flood. Regret. Shame. Horror. Self-loathing. Alexandre Laurent, the man who controlled empires, could not control the shaking in his hands. For the first time in his life, money offered no solution. No apology felt large enough. No gesture could undo a decade of silence. He ordered his legal team to dismantle the financial protections around his sisters. Allowances were cut. Assets frozen. Public consequences followed quietly but firmly. Marguerite withdrew from public life, her authority finally broken. None of it brought relief. Because the truth demanded something far more terrifying than punishment. It demanded humility. Alexandre stood by the window again, Brooklyn clearer now in the morning light, and understood something with devastating clarity. Finding Isabella was not about forgiveness. It was about accountability. He did not know if she would speak to him. He did not know if she would spit in his face or slam the door. He did not know if she would allow him anywhere near the children he had never known. But he knew this. Running from the truth had cost him 10 years. He would not lose another day. As the city woke around him, Alexandre Laurent made the hardest decision of his life. He would go to Brooklyn. Not as a billionaire. Not as a husband. But as a man prepared to kneel before the woman he had wronged, and accept whatever judgment she chose to give. There were no gates, no marble steps, no attendants waiting to open doors. Just cracked sidewalks, delivery trucks idling impatiently, and the distant echo of construction rising like a reminder that this borough was always building something new out of what had been broken before. Alexandre stepped out of the black sedan he had insisted on leaving 2 blocks away. He wanted to walk the rest of the distance. He needed to feel the city under his feet, to strip away the insulation wealth had wrapped around him for most of his life. The building was modest. Red brick. 5 stories. A small plaque near the entrance read, Laurent and Vale. The name struck him harder than he expected. She had kept it. Not the mansion. Not the money. But the name he had tried to take from her. Alexandre stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, his heart pounding with a force that felt almost violent. In 10 years, he had negotiated hostile takeovers, stared down governments, and dismantled empires. None of that compared to the terror clawing through him now. Because Isabella could destroy him with a single word. Inside, the office was quiet but alive. Clean lines. Warm wood. Glass walls etched with subtle designs. Framed photographs lined one wall, ports, ships, people shaking hands across cultures. Not trophies. Stories. Alexandra approached the receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes and a headset slightly askew. "I'm here to see Isabella Lauron," he said, his voice lower than usual. The receptionist studied him for a moment. "Does she know you're coming?" "No," he admitted. "But she should." Something in his expression, raw, stripped of arrogance, made the woman hesitate. Then she stood and gestured toward a closed office door. "She's in there." Alexandra thanked her and walked forward, each step heavier than the last. His hand hovered near the door. He almost turned away. Then he knocked. "Come in," Isabella's voice called, calm and steady. He opened the door. She was standing by the window, Brooklyn sunlight framing her silhouette. She looked older, stronger. Her hair was pulled back simply, her posture straight, her presence commanding without effort. This was not the woman he had cast out in tears. This was a woman who had survived him. Isabella turned. For a fraction of a second, her composure cracked. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Alexandra saw it. The sharp intake of breath. The flicker of disbelief. Then her face closed. "You're 10 years late," she said evenly. The words landed like a verdict. Alexandra swallowed hard. He stepped forward, and then stopped. Something inside him knew he did not have the right to cross that space. "I know," he said hoarsely. "I'm not here to defend myself." She folded her arms. "Then speak carefully." Alexandra took a breath that shook his chest. And then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to his knees. The sound of it was soft. The impact was not. Isabella stared at him, frozen. "I was wrong," Alexandra said, his voice breaking openly now. "I accused you without proof. I chose silence when you needed my voice. I let my mother's certainty replace my own conscience. And I punished you for a crime you did not commit." Tears burned his eyes, but he did not wipe them away. "I destroyed our marriage. I destroyed your life. And I didn't even look back." The room felt impossibly small. Isabella said nothing. "I know apologies are meaningless after 10 years, he continued. "I know forgiveness is not owed. I came because you deserved the truth. All of it." Her jaw tightened. "You came because you found out," she corrected. "Not because you believed me." The truth of it hit him harder than any accusation. "Yes," he admitted. "And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Isabella spoke. "Get up." He obeyed immediately, rising to his feet like a chastened child. "You don't get to kneel here," she said quietly. "You knelt too late." She moved behind her desk, placing it between them, not as a shield, but as a boundary. "You want the truth," she continued. "Here it is. When you threw me out, I was pregnant." Alexandra's breath hitched, though he already knew. "Triplets," she said. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to surprise you. I thought it would remind you who we were." Her voice remained controlled, but her eyes glistened. "I slept on a borrowed mattress. I gave birth alone. I built this company while raising 3 children who never knew their father's face. Every birthday, every fever, every school form that asked for a name I left blank." Each word carved into him. "You don't get to apologize for that," she said softly. "You live with it." Alexandra nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I will. If you let me." She studied him, really studied him, for the first time since he entered. "What do you want, Alexandra?" she asked. He answered without hesitation. "Nothing I don't earn. I want the chance to take responsibility. For the truth. For the damage. For our children." The word hung between them. "Our." Isabella looked out the window toward the Brooklyn streets she had rebuilt herself upon. "You don't meet them today," she said finally. "And you don't call yourself their father." His chest tightened. "I understand. But," she added, turning back, "you can wait. Hope, fragile, terrifying, flickered inside him. She opened the door. This is not forgiveness. This is the beginning of accountability. Alexandra nodded, humbled beyond words. As he stepped back into the Brooklyn sunlight, one truth echoed louder than any other. This reunion had not healed anything. But for the first time in 10 years, the door was no longer closed. The morning Alexandra Laurent stood across the street from Isabella Moreau's office, the borough carried on with its stubborn rhythm. A bodega door banged open and shut. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere above him a radio argued with the day. 10 years had trained Brooklyn to mind its business, and 10 years had trained Alexandra to build walls, not cross streets. He stood there anyway, hands empty, coat buttoned wrong, the city loud enough to drown the pulse in his ears. The building was a converted factory in Dumbo. Brick scarred with history, windows tall and honest. No marble. No guards. Just a hand-painted sign by the door, Moreau Systems. Under it, in smaller letters, "Build what lasts." He had read those words in an article the night before, a profile written with admiration and restraint. The reporter had not mentioned that the founder once slept on a mattress on the floor of a one-bedroom rental, that she'd learned to negotiate contracts with a baby bottle balanced on her knee. 3 of them, eventually, like a miracle that never asked permission. Alexandra crossed the street. Inside, the office smelled like coffee and clean paper. The space hummed with work, screens glowing, voices trading ideas, a whiteboard layered with arrows and questions. People moved with purpose and without fear. It struck him with a quiet force. This was what a company looked like when it trusted its people. When it wasn't run by intimidation disguised as tradition. He gave his name to the receptionist, and the name did what it always did. It changed the temperature of the room. A pause. A glance. A message sent. "She'll see you," the woman said, not unkindly. "Please wait." He waited. The door opened, and Isabella stepped out. 10 years had not softened her, they had refined her. Her hair was pulled back, her face calm, her posture grounded. She wore a navy dress that spoke of meetings and resolve, not apology. For a breath, neither of them moved. Brooklyn leaned closer. "You found us," she said. "I'm sorry," he answered, because it was the truest sentence he had left. She studied him with a gaze that had learned to measure storms. "We have 15 minutes. In the conference room, glass walls held the city like a witness box. Alexandra told the story without ornament. The audit. The offshore accounts. His sister's name spoken aloud, stripped of affection. His mother's silence, shaped like approval. He did not ask for mercy. He named his failures, one by one, until they formed a line he could not step around. "I believed the lie because it made me powerful," he said. "And because it asked nothing of me except loyalty to my own blood." Isabella listened. When he finished, the room felt newly emptied. "I was pregnant," she said, evenly. "With triplets. The day you told me to leave." The words landed without drama, which made them devastating. Alexandra's breath left him like a confession he hadn't known he was holding. His hands curled against the table. "I wanted to surprise you," she continued. "I wanted to come back with proof that life had grown anyway. But then I learned something else." She met his eyes. "That surprises are for people who feel safe." He nodded, because he had no right to interrupt. She stood. "You should go." The dismissal was not cruel. It was complete. Weeks passed. Brooklyn turned its calendar with indifference. Alexandra wrote letters he did not send. He stepped back from his company and installed leaders who did not share his last name. He sold the Manhattan penthouse and moved into a brownstone rental on Dean Street. Learned the sound of his own footsteps without an entourage. He volunteered at a community legal clinic, anonymous by choice. He began, slowly, to become someone who could be trusted with ordinary things. Isabella watched from a distance, because survival teaches vigilance. She did not open doors because someone knocked nicely. She watched consistency. She watched humility practiced in small rooms. The children met him by accident, on a Saturday at Brooklyn Bridge Park. 3 identical heads bent over science kit, arguing about magnets with the seriousness of philosophers. Isabella arrived with coffee and saw Alexandra freeze 10 feet away, as if a line had been drawn in chalk. "They're mine," she said, not unkindly. "They're ours. But they are not yours yet." He swallowed. "May I say hello?" She considered the park, the river, the city that had raised them all. 5 minutes. He knelt because it felt right. "I'm Alexandra." "Like the explorer?" one asked. "Less brave," he said, and they laughed. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became a conversation about bridges and why magnets argue with gravity. Isabella watched him listen. Watched him fail to impress and not mind. Watched him learn their names and repeat them correctly. Brooklyn nodded. That night, she allowed him to walk her home. On the stoop, under a streetlight that hummed like a secret, she spoke the truth she had been carrying like a blade. "I don't need you," she said. "I built something honest without you." "I know," he replied. "I'm asking if I can earn a place beside it." Brooklyn did not cheer. It simply kept the light on. Forgiveness, the city knew, is not a moment. It is a practice. The Lauron family mansion, once a symbol of absolute control, now felt hollow. Alexandra returned not as a prince of the empire but as a man stripped of entitlement, carrying the weight of truth and years of remorse. The halls were familiar, the chandeliers sparkling coldly above him, reflecting everything he had once believed and now knew was false. He summoned his mother, Marguerite, to the drawing room first. She arrived with her usual quiet authority, but this time her posture carried a shadow, the certainty she always projected shaken. Helena and Colette followed, less composed than their mother, faces pale and tight with fear. For the first time, they were not in command. Alexandra did not sit. He paced the room, letting the silence fill the space before speaking. "I have discovered everything," he said. "The missing 50 million. The accounts. Your complicity, mother. Your lies, sisters. You betrayed Isabella, and yourselves, because you believed my loyalty was unquestionable." Marguerite's eyes, always sharp, softened with a flicker of regret. "I only sought to protect the family," she murmured. "Protect?" Alexandra's voice rose. "You taught me to distrust the truth, to punish the innocent, to assume guilt where there was none. Is that your version of protection?" Helena stepped forward, trembling but defiant. "You had everything, Alexandra. We merely corrected what you ignored." Alexandra shook his head, anger and sorrow tangled in his chest. "No. You stole. You lied. You hid behind blood and wealth, thinking that would absolve you of morality. And mother, you let them." Colette's voice cracked. "We were afraid. Everything we did, we thought." "You thought wrong," he interrupted. "Isabella was never the enemy. The enemy was complacency, and all of you nurtured it." Marguerite's hands shook as she folded them in front of her. "I misjudged her, and you. I only wanted to believe in family." Alexandra felt the years collapse around him. The mansion was beautiful, but hollow. Power had meant nothing without integrity. The empire, built on lies and fear, had crumbled not because of outsiders, but because the rot was inside. And now he could no longer ignore it. "I have begun to correct the damage," he said. "Helena, Colette, your assets are frozen until restitution is arranged. Mother, you will step down from the board of Lauron Global Logistics. I will assume full responsibility for rebuilding what has been misused." The room was heavy with the weight of accountability. Not one of them spoke. This was a reckoning that could not be avoided. Alexandra had learned to confront problems directly. Now he confronted the ones closest to him. Betrayal by blood is harder to bear than any corporate failure. "I am also here for Isabella," he continued quietly. "Not to reclaim her, not to ask forgiveness lightly, but to accept the consequences of my failures. To rebuild, if she allows it, a family fractured by my hubris." Marguerite's eyes brimmed with tears she refused to shed openly. Helena and Colette averted their gazes, understanding for the first time the true cost of their actions. 10 years stolen from a woman who deserved everything, and a man who had failed to see truth in front of him. Alexandra left the mansion that day changed, carrying a sense of gravity and humility that no amount of money or authority could provide. The empire, once a fortress of pride, now required healing from within, a healing that began with honesty, accountability, and the willingness to face the consequences of betrayal. Outside, Brooklyn breathed around him. The streets hummed with life that had no patience for pretense. This city, relentless in its rhythm, had already witnessed the small steps he took toward redemption. The mansion would remain a monument to the past, but the path forward had begun, rooted in truth, justice, and the hope that what had been broken could, in time, be made whole again. Winter in Brooklyn carried a crisp, reflective quality, as if the city itself were taking stock. Snow dusted the brownstone stoops, and the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery drifted through the streets. It was here, in the modest streets far from Manhattan's towers, that Alexandre Laurent found himself learning what it truly meant to rebuild, not a business, not an empire, but a family. The first step was always small. On a Saturday morning, he arrived at Isabella's apartment with a simple bag of pastries. He did not wear a suit. He did not drive a chauffeured car. He carried only himself, a man who had been stripped of pride and forced to confront the consequences of his failures. Isabella opened the door cautiously. The children were in the living room, sprawled over a tangle of toys and coloring books. Triplets, 2 boys and a girl, each with dark curls and bright, inquisitive eyes, glanced at the visitor. Recognition flickered, but no judgment had yet formed. They had lived 10 years without him. They did not know what to expect from a man with a name like Laurent. "Good morning," Alexandra said softly. His voice, steady despite the nerves gnawing at his stomach, carried a warmth that had long been absent in his life. Isabella regarded him from the doorway. "Good morning," she replied cautiously, folding her arms. Her face was a mixture of curiosity, caution, and an undercurrent of hope that he would not ruin what she had built. "The children are still adjusting to new routines. Are you ready for that?" Alexandra nodded. "I am. And I understand if they need time. And if you do too." He stepped inside, offering a gentle smile. "I brought pastries." The children paused, intrigued by the gesture. Bread and chocolate croissants. Humble but deliberate. The first conversation with the children was awkward. They asked questions, some curious, some testing. "Are you really our dad?" one asked. Another demanded, "Why weren't you there?" Alexandra did not flinch. He answered honestly, without excuse or justification. He did not speak of wealth, or power, or regrets softened by time. He spoke of truth and responsibility. "I wasn't there when I should have been," he said quietly. "I made terrible choices. I hurt your mother, and I hurt you without even knowing it. I cannot change the past. But I want to be here now, if you'll let me." The children absorbed the words with the seriousness only 10-year-olds could summon, their small faces etched with the curiosity of those who were learning what love might mean beyond absence. Over the next weeks, Alexandra became a constant presence, not as a savior, not as a redeemer, but as a steady, patient figure. He helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and learned the little rhythms that defined their days. He discovered that he could not buy trust. It had to be earned, moment by moment, word by word. Isabella observed quietly, granting him space yet never completely letting go of her protective instinct. He faltered sometimes, failing to anticipate a child's need, misjudging a moment of fear or frustration. But each time, he apologized and tried again, showing a humility foreign to the man who had once ruled over empires with iron certainty. Outside the apartment, Brooklyn carried on. The snow melted into puddles along the curbs, children's laughter from the park echoed, and neighbors exchanged warm greetings. It was a city that demanded persistence, a city that valued consistency, and Alexandra began to understand the lessons it offered. The emotional tipping point came one evening, when the triplets performed a small play for their parents. The story was improvised, filled with the imagination only children possess, yet it revealed the depth of their feelings. Scenes of loss, longing, and reconciliation. Alexandra watched from the edge of the living room, overwhelmed. He realized that the children had already begun forgiving him in ways he could not force, ways he had to nurture. Isabella caught his eye, her expression unreadable at first, then softening. She did not need to speak. The silent acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition that he was becoming the man he had failed to be, not just for himself, but for their family. Days turned into weeks, and trust began to root itself. They ventured to the park together, sharing laughter and playful arguments, navigating life's small trials as a unit. Alexandra understood that rebuilding was not about grand gestures. It was about showing up, day after day, doing the right thing even when it went unnoticed, and letting love, in its quiet forms, speak louder than words. One evening, as they walked home from the park, Isabella finally spoke. "You're doing well," she said, her voice calm but not without emotion. "But remember this, it's not about erasing the past. It's about living differently from now on. Every action counts." Alexandra nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly from his shoulders. "I understand," he replied. "And I promise to keep understanding every day." That night, as the family sat together, Brooklyn's lights flickering through the window, Alexandra realized the truth he had sought for 10 long years. Redemption was not a destination but a journey, measured in moments of sincerity, patience, and perseverance. He could not undo the mistakes of the past, but he could shape a future worth living, a future built on love, trust, and presence. And for the first time in a decade, he felt a fragile, yet undeniable, sense of hope. Brooklyn's skyline was muted that morning, a soft grey over the East River, but to Alexandra Laurent it felt almost luminous. 10 years of silence, of mistakes, of pride and misjudgment had led him to this moment. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of winter thawing into spring, a season of renewal, and it seemed as though even the city itself held its breath, waiting to witness the final step of a journey that had begun in betrayal and ended in fragile reconciliation. He stood outside Isabella's apartment building, watching the children play on the sidewalk with neighbors and friends. Their laughter was unguarded, bright, and it struck him like sunlight piercing a long, dark tunnel. They had grown so much, so resilient, in his absence. Every achievement, every smile, every tiny rebellion had been shaped without his guidance. And yet, here he was, still hopeful, still determined to be part of their lives. Isabella appeared at the door, a silhouette framed by soft morning light. She had dressed simply, in a navy coat and scarf, her hair pulled back, no sign of the armor she had once worn so carefully. But there was strength in her eyes, a quiet force that had carried her through 10 years of hardship and triumph alike. Alexandra approached slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to presume. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied, a hint of a smile touching her lips. She studied him as she always did now, measuring sincerity, gauging his patience, weighing the consistency he had shown over weeks and months. He nodded toward the children. "Are they ready for breakfast?" "They are," she said. "And so are you. But first, I want to hear why you're here today." Alexandra took a deep breath. "I'm here because I want to live differently. Not as a man who commands respect through fear or wealth, but as a man who earns it through presence, honesty, and love. I cannot undo the past, but I can choose the future. I want to be part of that future, with you, and with our children, if you'll let me." She considered him. 10 years of history, pain, and disappointment hung between them, heavy yet no longer insurmountable. "Alexandra," she said finally, "I have seen consistency, humility, and effort. But the proof will always be in what you do, not what you say." He nodded, acknowledging the unspoken test that lay ahead. "I understand. And I am ready to show it, every day." The children ran toward them then, tripping over each other in their eagerness. Triplets, full of energy, curiosity, and laughter, each unique yet unmistakably connected to both parents. They surrounded Alexandra, tugging at his coat, chattering incessantly. One of the boys held out a drawing, a crude sketch of a house and a smiling family. "This is us," he said proudly. Alexandra knelt, taking the drawing carefully. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "And I promise to help build it, every day." The children smiled, their trust growing like seedlings in soil. Isabella watched quietly, a mix of relief and pride softening her stern features. She knew that trust could not be forced, only nurtured. And in these small, genuine moments, she saw that Alexandre was becoming the man he had always had the potential to be. The man she had once loved, not corrupted by pride or deception, but refined through humility and determination. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of family life slowly settled into something warm, honest, and alive. Alexandre remained present, not as a visitor, not as a man trying to reclaim lost authority, but as a father, a partner, and a man who understood the true value of love and consistency. The Lauron Empire no longer defined him. It had become a tool to support the life he was now building with Isabella and the children. One evening, the family walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, snow melting along the edges of the walkway. The city hummed below them, lights sparkling in the river like scattered stars. Alexandra held Isabella's hand, the triplets skipping ahead, their laughter echoing in the space between towers and water. "I never imagined we'd be here," Alexandra said softly, looking down at her. "Neither did I," Isabella admitted, squeezing his hand gently. "But here we are. And we are building it together." He nodded, feeling a fullness in his chest he had not known in a decade. "Thank you," he said, voice low, honest. "For letting me in. For trusting me, and for showing me what matters." She smiled, the warmth genuine, free of hesitation. "You earned it, Alexandra. Slowly, patiently. And that is the only way trust can be rebuilt, brick by brick." They paused on the bridge, the river flowing endlessly beneath them, carrying away the echoes of the past. The city stretched around them, indifferent yet alive, a reminder that life moves forward, that mistakes can be faced, and that love, once nurtured, can flourish even after the harshest winters. Alexandre looked at his children, at Isabella, at the life he had once abandoned. He realized that all the wealth in the world could not have bought this. The laughter of his children, the trust of the woman he loved, the quiet satisfaction of redemption earned through effort and sincerity. And for the first time in 10 years, he felt whole. Brooklyn did not cheer, and no one applauded. But the light of the morning, the river below, the warmth of family around him, felt like its own kind of blessing. The past was acknowledged, justice served, and love reclaimed, not through grand gestures, but through patience, presence, and unwavering commitment. And in that, Alexandre Lauron discovered something more valuable than any empire. The truth that some things, once lost, can still be rebuilt, stronger, brighter, and more enduring than before.